This is the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
Well, it's a new week with a new and developing focus. Parliament resumes today, and the fireworks begin. I don't know when or how large, but you can bet on it. More prescient are the results of two by-elections this evening, whenever they come out. In one of them, the Montreal one, there are 91 candidates. Probably only about 3 serious ones, but 91 candidates. So the counting takes quite a bit of time when that happens. In any event, one is in central Montreal. It's called Aymar-LaSalle-Verdun. That's the riding. And the other in central Winnipeg, which is the Elmwood-Transcona riding. These would ordinarily not be particularly important, but they are in a situation where we're entering the final year of the Trudeau minority government. And of course, today is the first day of the fall resumption of the House of Commons. So there is no longer a support agreement between the Liberals and the NDP, and Trudeau is sitting there in that minority government. The polls show an overwhelming lead by the Poilievre Conservatives over everybody else. Or are the Conservatives going to win both of those by-elections? Well, they may not win either, because neither of them is particularly conservative territory. Quebec is the only province where the Conservatives do not hold a lead. Every other province, it's substantial. And Canada-wide, it's substantial. But in Quebec, the Bloc Québécois tends to own that, and the Liberals are up somewhere ahead of the Conservatives. So not there. And in the Winnipeg riding, you've got a very safe seat for the NDP, or at least it once was. I mean, a couple of months ago, we heard the Toronto St. Paul's went down. Liberals, very safe seat, lost it to the Conservatives. So who knows? But in Elmwood-Tascona, which is the Winnipeg riding, if you go back to the 2021 election, what you've got is an 11,000 seat plurality by the winning NDP. So what's going to happen when they count the votes tonight? I don't know. So Elmwood-Transcona, typically an NDP riding. Daniel Blakey was the winner in 2021. The Conservatives came second. They were 9,000 votes behind him. Again, if 4,500 people decided that they wanted to leave the NDP and move over to the Conservatives, which is the two choices in that riding, going back for a ways, then we're looking at a possible majority upset or a major upset. So there's great interest across the country. Of course, the number there in Quebec, for example, is you won by 10,000 votes last time, Liberals. The Bloc Québécois, 9,000 for the NDP. But if 5,000 votes left the Liberals and moved to the Bloc Québécois, that's a repeat of what happened in Toronto. So it's just a numbers game. You know, it's a math wizard's paradise, but this is the real deal in politics. Near the end of last week, Abacus Data published a significant poll using a very large sample size and found Conservatives at 43% Canada-wide, Liberals at 22%, NDP at 18%, and that's national. Prior September polling showed more or less the same disparities. That demonstrates why looking for a bellwether tonight becomes pretty difficult. We'll be chatting with Dan Donovan, publisher and managing editor of Ottawa Life magazine, in the latter part of the program. Aside from being around for 27 years, the magazine does a great job covering politics federally, so Dan knows what he's talking about. He'll be joining us in about 10 minutes to discuss these by-elections further, some of the niceties that I may have missed. Someone was nabbed trying to shoot at Donald Trump over the weekend. What does that say to me? I'll tell you about it. One, he is a target, and we should be asking the question, who exactly is targeting him? Not the man, but what's behind it. And two, he's now well protected. A Secret Service agent spotted a gun barrel through the fence of the golf course Trump was on, his own golf course, Trump International in Palm Beach. I wonder what we expect, or what we can expect on all sides as we watch the Southern action very closely. We do up in Canada between now and November 5th. Stay with us for that and more. It's the Sherman Report, and I will be right back.
You're with the Sherman Report. Daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
What in the world is with the United States and wannabe assassins, particularly and only assassins who want to get Trump? Nobody got a shot off, but there was a lone gunman apparently using an AR-15 over the weekend. He was spotted by a very sharp-eyed Secret Service agent as Donald Trump played golf at the Trump International Course in Palm Beach. Where else would he play? A swift onlooker, not Taylor Swift for sure, got a look at the guy running to his car and driving away. That citizen took a photo of the car, talk about presence of mind, and captured the license plates, or as they call them in the States, tags. That guy gave police what they needed, and he was apprehended on the I-95. If you know South Florida, the I-95 is crucial to it, and that couldn't have been very far from where the Trump golf course is, up in Martin County, which is the next one to Palm Beach County. That's all well and good. If two people have tried, won't there be a third, is the question I would ask. I don't know. I hope not. And what if that person is crafty enough to succeed? I really hope not. Okay, all the boneheads out there just said to themselves, yeah, good for the United States and the world. Well, if you did, that's dumb. Even Kamala Harris tweeted her concern yesterday and wished the former president well. Look, the American election is one like no other. Trump has held rallies in support of this election literally for years. I stopped going to Florida for the winter several years ago, and I recall him holding one of them about 10 miles from where I was living. I considered attending just to see what a Trump rally was like. I should have, but I didn't. Toronto friends of mine did, and they thought it was a hoot. They thought it was great fun. So that's Donald Trump nonstop from when he lost in 2020 right through till now when he hopes to win in 2024. Meanwhile, the country is being governed apparently by Joe Biden. Don't know where he is, but by Joe Biden with Kamala Harris as his vice president. She's out on the campaign trail. When election time draws near, Joe starts campaigning, but can't handle extemporaneous responses during a debate, and particularly to the debate questions generally on TV. Biden takes the criticism and he assimilates it. He says he was just tired and admits he could have done better, but he will, and he's going to go all the way. So he goes on television from the White House and he tells America and the world that he is going to go the distance and will beat Donald Trump. Not 48 hours later, he's back on TV doing a 180-degree flip and telling people he's not up to the task. And presto, there's Kamala Harris like magic. No primaries, no caucuses, no challengers, just Biden saying she's the one. And there's me, and I suspect many others saying, holy shit, how can this be? Are you using some kind of a cattle prod here on anybody who might want to challenge her? She's not the choice of the people because she didn't run to be the choice of the people, even the Democratic people. She's Biden's choice. She never went through a primary. She never went through any of the caucuses. When she did, back when Biden was originally nominated in 2016, she left for lack of funds way early in the game. So there are legions of well-known Democrats out there who could have jumped up and said, oh, no, you don't, and thrown their hats right into the ring. That would have made the Democratic National Convention what those things used to be, and they were fun to watch. A horse race where you actually have states in conversations with other states and doing a bunch of horse trading as one after another candidate falls off a list. By a process of elimination, the convention chooses the presidential candidate. Not this time. I alluded a few days ago to unseen and unnamed powers operating in the United States that have very vested interests in never seeing Donald Trump take office as president again. Are 2 assassination attempts and Kamala Harris sufficient to convince you? Just give it some thought. Or better still, do your own research. That is an opinion of one gleaned from reading. I do a lot of that, reading. And there's lots to read. What do I think? That it'll be President Harris as of November the 5th, and that there's going to be a severe penalty exacted for doing that somewhere down the line. My opinion. Back in a moment.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
Let's talk a little about the country of Iran, a pariah on the world stage if ever there was one. I am old enough to remember the Shah of Iran. Do you remember the Shah of Iran? I remember seeing him and his wife being greeted by once upon a time Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau when the Shah and his wife arrived to welcome Expo 67. It's a long time ago. I was a kid at the time, but it was clear even then that the Shah and the West got along really well. I'm also aware through friends that one of Iran's great trading partners and a travel destination for people in either direction was a country known as Israel, then about 19 years old. What happened? Well, there was a revolution, and a very dark figure in history who was living as an outcast in France entered the picture. His name was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He sent cassette tapes that were circulated around Iran over from France. He'd make them in France and send them over, and they exhorted his followers to overthrow the Shah and return Iran to its Islamic roots under him. Short form, after a bunch of American hostages held in the U.S. Embassy and a nightly program on that, basically you could go down, and we called it the Ayatollah Show. It was tongue-in-cheek, but it wasn't funny. Anyway, when Jimmy Carter was defeated after a first term, an only term, as president, and Ronald Reagan won, 15 minutes after he won, those hostages were released. But the entire debacle worked, and the Ayatollah became the nominal head of government in the now Islamic Republic of Iran. There are more than enough people living in today's Iran who remember when women attended university and women became engineers and women wore blue jeans and they listened to rock music. Today, Iranian women, even showing their hair, meaning they refuse to wear hijabs, can be jailed or worse. And gay men can be and have been hanged from cranes at the center of the city, Tehran. On a personal note, I recall when there was a conservative government in Ottawa, pre-Trudeau, I was at an event in Thornhill where many Iranians, who prefer to be called Persians, living here as they do, and there are many of them, still live here as Persians. I attended the event, and so did many other MPPs, and one of them was Iranian by birth and a neighboring MPP to myself, to my riding. He was speaking. I was awaiting my turn at the podium, and he said through the mic, "Peter Sherman, you're a conservative. Do you know anyone in Ottawa who's involved in immigration?" He had his tongue in his cheek, and I shouted, "Yes, I do," with my tongue in my cheek from the audience. "What do you need?" He responded from the podium, about 70 million visas, which indicates what Iranians or Persians living in Canada think of what's going on in the Persia they left, which is not called Persia. It's called plain out Iran. Anyway, that's what happened. Of course, it was a joke, but the suggestion was, and still is, that a majority of Iranians live under the yoke of strict law, strict Islamic law, and the rule of the mullahs. They are the religious leaders who actually call the shots in Iran. If they were taken down, it is likely Iran would take its place amongst the nations in the Middle East and end a lot of strife so evident in that part of the world right now. I'll be right back.
You're with the Sherman Report. Daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
It's been about 10 days since NDP leader Jagmeet Singh ripped up his agreement with the Liberals, ripped it up, so he says, to support them in confidence motions and on their legislative agenda, which of course reflected things that Jagmeet Singh and his NDP wanted. They had honored it for 2.5 years, 2.5 years, not so happily, it appears, if you listen to what Singh has had to say in the ensuing period about his friend, Justin Trudeau. He doesn't care for the weak Justin Trudeau, his words, not mine. It was simple. That party supported Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to secure whatever they could in return. And for a while, that worked. The NDP can take credit for dental care. They can take credit for pharmacare. For example, Singh thought that by so doing, he would expand his party's acceptability in Canadian minds and they'd stand a chance of moving into winning territory. That's not really straight thinking. There is no reward for Jagmeet Singh. Most Canadians do not favor a left-wing socialist party So he won't be receiving any favor for his actions. At least I don't think so. And there's been no blip in the polls whatsoever. And there have been polls done since then. If you've been wondering why the Liberal polling has been so bad, same reason. The Liberals have become left-wing socialists in how they govern. And so the Conservatives are favored at this juncture and likely right through to whenever we get an election. And what they're favored for is to bring the government back to at least something resembling centrist. Some people may think that's right-wing centrist, but it's certainly a lot more centrist than what we've seen from either of those two so-called progressive parties. What is it with Canadians anyway? My take is that Liberal or Conservative, Canadians like a fairly centrist government. They do not consider what the Liberals or New Democrats have delivered to be that kind of government. It may equally be true that some do not think of the Conservatives as centrist. I do. I think that if realist were an adjective applied to political parties or to governments, that's where the Conservatives would land today, realist. If you think Canadians were looking for dental care or pharmacare as a program or a school lunch program, in majority, they were not. Canadians would take the position that taxation be reduced sufficiently to allow themselves to provide those items for their families on their own. If you wave an orange flag and shout from the rooftops that you secured those things from the Liberals, and if the Liberals wave a red flag and shout from the rooftops that they did those things for you, you are sadly mistaken if you think that they're going to applaud you and elect you for it. Those items fall under the heading of nanny state care. Nanny state care. Have you heard that before? In other words, don't worry if you're too government dependent or too stupid to provide them for yourself and those around you. We're here to help. We're here to help. I cite those famous 9 words uttered by Ronald Reagan once upon a time. He said from the most untrustworthy 9-word phrase that he could find. This is the most untrustworthy 9-word phrase he knew of. And I'm quoting, "I am from the government and I'm here to help. I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Anyone who knows how government works also knows that the private sector can do just about anything better than any government can. If you make marketable EV cars, you will sell them. Battery life, battery replacement, and battery construction impact on the earth have themselves come to roost, and the EVs are not selling. Car companies, being pretty good at following trends, are rushing to market vehicles that run on hydrogen fuel cells. No pollution, no big deal battery replacement, high power internal combustion engines that have zero pollution output. That's where governments wanted you to be. Governments are a pain in the ass. Can't you see that? Doesn't anyone do any research? Give people their due. People aren't stupid. They do trust the private sector. They know that they can buy dental insurance and pharmacare insurance. I have it. I had it before any of this. I'm keeping it. Has worked so well for me for many years. I want Trudeau and his goddamn carbon tax to just get out of my life. I don't think I'm alone. I want more tax rebates because government deserts some of these programs, and then we can do better. And that way, I'll recoup dollars, you'll recoup dollars that we need to pay for them personally. And we handle our own lives. You wanted to know why I'm a conservative? Because conservatives conserve. That's why it's called conservatism. They don't toss money at everything that they can find and tell you how great they are. That's not about giving rich people a tax break. I'm certainly not a rich person. And that's precisely why I'd like my money back and these programs returned to private business. Back in a moment with Dan Donovan.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
Show, I did a little mini review of the 2 by-elections underway now. One is Émard-LaSalle-Verdun, a Liberal stronghold not unlike Toronto St. Paul's was, where the Liberals were handed a great big smack by voters as the decades-old Liberal bastion fell to the Conservatives. Could that happen in Montreal? Not likely. Conservative strength is large across Canada, but we're talking about Quebec here, and Quebec has its own politics. If this riding is lost to a different party, my guess would be that it would be the Bloc Québécois. In Elmwood, Transcona, Winnipeg riding, the NDP is the big dog, won it over the Conservatives by 11,000 votes back in 2021. Will we see an upset? Talk to me around 11 o'clock tonight, and I'll tell you. Meanwhile, we are joined by this gentleman, Dan Donovan. Dan is the publisher and managing editor of Ottawa Life magazine, the award-winning, largest, longest-running, and most popular magazine in Canada's capital region. For the past 27 years, Ottawa Life has been there. And aside from Ottawa Life, Dan, you've been covering everything to do with federal elections.
Yes, that's a big, obviously, and thank you for having me on your show, Peter.
My
it's
pleasure.
Wonderful to be here.
Pleasure.
And of course, Ottawa lives and breathes politics. And we've always approached Ottawa from what we call the federal perspective. So we've always had our thumb on the sort of pulse of what's going on with regards to, federal elections, by-elections, politics on the Hill, and that sort of thing. And of course, these two by-elections today are clearly important, and what I call marker elections, because I think, usually a by-election, the government, if they lose it, will say, well, it's not really it's sort of the temperature, but it's not really the temperature of the country. It doesn't really mean anything. But this really does mean something today, in both in Montreal and, of course, in Manitoba.
Okay, so the situation in Parliament is numerically difficult for everybody, all the parties there. The minority Liberals particularly, but by the same token, in order to bring them down, the three other main parties have to combine or the votes aren't there. So what has to happen in these elections, in your view?
Well, I think the first thing is the Liberals have to lose. I mean, it's not going to help them to win. So, but seriously though, I think the Bloc Québécois is become critical right now, because the Tories, they cannot have an election, they cannot force an election without the BQ support. They need the NDP support and the BQ support, but they need the Bloc support. And the Bloc are playing a little shifty on this, as they always do, and they'll do what's in their interest. Now, interestingly, in La Salle Verdun, in this riding, it's important to remember, and I know you know this, and it's important for your listeners to understand that this riding has been a Liberal bastion riding for decades. It was the former riding of Paul Martin, the former Prime Minister, and for years he would win massive majorities here. It went against the Liberals in 2011, and if your listeners will recall, when they had that fellow Michael Ignatieff, who the Tories claim was just visiting. Apparently he was, because he's living over in Hungary right now. He didn't last long, but when he was a leader and ran and lost and came third in that election, the seat went to the NDP. But then it very quickly went back to the Liberals in 2015, and David Lametti, the Trudeau's Justice Minister, the Attorney General and Justice Minister, was the person who held the seat. Now, Trudeau drop-kicked him right out of the cabinet, like he's done to so many other people last year. And then Lametti, after that, it was really quite an inglorious exit. And this is, of course, happened after the trucker convoy, and them invoking the Emergency Measures Act and doing all of this kind of stuff that they really shouldn't have done. But that's a whole other story. But the point is, Lametti quit. And so the Bloc have a very strong candidate in the riding, a guy named Louis-Philippe Sauvé. Right now, according to the polls, according to the 338 poll, it's neck and neck. According to a local poll in Montreal yesterday, he's ahead by 3 points. So, and the Liberals have a lady running named Laura Palestini. Now that's interesting, because I want to tie that name into the NDP guy, Craig Sauvé, who's running. And this guy, I think somebody dropped him at birth. I don't know what happened to this guy. He decided it would be a good idea to go out and campaign with a poster of the Palestinian flag behind him.
I know. I saw this last week.
I don't know. Did somebody get this guy some oxygen or something? I can't understand why you would do that. But the point is, that's what he's been defined as in this race. And of course, there's that's a kind of problematic in Montreal, but we'll see how that impacts him tonight. Now, the Liberal candidate, her name is Laura Palestini. How ironic, a
little.
But she's actually Italian Canadian, a local person in the riding, known in the community. There's a larger Italian community in that riding. The problem with her is that she's losing, and she came out on the weekend and said that people in the riding should not focus on Justin Trudeau in this by-election. It's not about him. It's about her and her community work. Well, here's a clue.
And we have a word that describes that. That's bullshit. Okay, it is totally about him.
It's, you know what? You can't ignore the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is Justin Trudeau, and people are just tired of the guy, and he doesn't, know when to take the exit. And this is, I think, going to dramatically play out tonight. Now, the fact is, even if it's close and they somehow, a miracle descends upon this riding and this Laura Palestinian lady wins this, if it's close, it's still a loss for them. But I'm very curious to see what's going to happen here tonight.
So call it.
I'm calling it for the Bloc. I think the Bloc Québécois are going to win it. The Bloc Québécois have had their leader down here canvassing. They've had a number of members of their caucus. They've been pulling out all the stops. And, Blanchette, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, I mean, there was a time like 20 or 30 years ago, you can never say this. I always loved René Lévesque. I always thought he was a brilliant man, a great Democrat.
He was.
And there's been some great PQ leaders. Gilles Duceppe, I thought the guy was a wonderful man. I just didn't agree with his politics, but a wonderful man. Blanchette, kind of the same way. Like, he's one of the smartest guys in Parliament. He's got a good caucus. I mean, it's a bit of an irritant that he's a separatist. But, other than that, I mean, he's a smart guy, and he's run his caucus really well. And they've done a good job in this campaign. So I think tonight it's going to be the BQ that are going to come out on top. This Craig Sauvé guy.
If you look at the polls, the way they sit right now, it is not inconceivable that next election, general election, whenever it may be, could see a conservative majority with an opposition of Bloc Québécois, which would be unprecedented in Canada.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. Now, if I may, you recall when the great Jean Chrétien, look, how's it going? Everything is good. Remember him? Everybody.
Very well, I remember him, yes.
I remember once Mr. Chrétien said to me, Lucien Bouchard was the leader of the official opposition. You may recall that because he finished just ahead of the Reform Party in the 1993 election. So he actually became the official opposition. And Mr. Chrétien one day said to me, Dan, that guy is really irrigating me, okay? So, but I have to say, you're right. This could be a shocking turn of events. One thing I noticed from a poll I read earlier today, though, Peter, was that the Conservatives right now, not in this riding, because this riding it's very sort of center left, okay? Even with all the changes in Canada and the direction in politics changing. But in Quebec right now, Mr. Poilievre is neck and neck in second place with the Liberals. The Bloc are ahead in Quebec right now in the federal seats, okay? But Poilievre and the Tories...
I'd expect that.
Sure, but Poilievre and the Tories are at about 25.3%, and the Liberals are at just over 26%. So this is a massive meltdown for the Liberals, and I actually predict that Mr. Poilievre is going to do a lot. I think he's going to do as well in Quebec as Mulroney did.
Well, if he does, I mean, he could wind up with what's called a Mulroney majority, like 230 seats or something like that, which would be, I'm going to rule for as long as I want to until the term is up, then I'm going to run again. So what he's going to do is not be bothered as Trudeau has been by what's going to happen if these guys go away, those guys cave, whatever. He's going to take and use 4 years. I hope advantageously, I think it would be advantageously, by getting rid of a lot of the junk that they've put through and getting Canada back on the rails.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think one of the things that, respectfully, a lot of the media in this country, the legacy media, I call them in this country, the CTVs, the CBCs, the Global, all these types of, of course, Bell Media owns the Globe and Mail, and Post Media, it's owned by a hedge fund out of New York, yada, 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 Torstar. What a lot of these people doing, in my opinion, these people doing analysis are missing. What they are completely missing is that the middle in Canada, I always say Canada lives in the middle, Canada votes in the middle. The middle in Canada right now is the Conservative Party of Canada. The things that Pierre Poilievre has been saying for the last 18 months are not extreme. They are not fringe stuff. They're not right wing. He is in the middle. He's talking about pocketbook issues. He's talking about overtaxation. He's talking about overspending. He's talking about big bureaucracy. These are all everyday people issues, and when it comes to the social part of it, he's staying out of that stuff. He's not getting involved. Although it's interesting.
Why be involved in it? The other two parties, I mean, the Liberals are no longer liberal. They're socialist. The Socialists always were socialist. Now you've got this other party. In relative terms, people say, well, he's too far right. No, in relative terms, he's center, just like you say. And he's got to be the guy. He's got to be the guy.
To your point, you make a very good point, because what I've seen transpire in the last 8 years, besides the fact that this government has shown, as Thomas Mulcair famously wrote in June of 2022 in an excellent column, anyone can Google it. It's called a whole of government incompetence. And Mulcair pointed out that the Trudeau government, they don't seem to be able to manage or get anything done. But what they have done is they've ruined the most productive and progressive immigration system in the world. They've killed productivity in the country. They've taxed people to death. They overprinted money and created massive inflation. They've shut down the natural resources sector. They've gotten so involved in social causes that they've taken the Liberal Party far left of the NDP. I would make the case the Liberal Party now is even more left than the NDP. And what that's done is basically what you just said, is it's shifted everything. So the new center is a Conservative Party.
Absolutely.
And they're
I got to put the brakes on there, Dan, only because we're running short of time and we haven't touched on Elmwood-Tascona.
Yes.
And that is a well-known NDP riding with Conservatives like 11,000 votes back. Any chance of a change there?
Well, I do think there's going to be a change there. I'm predicting a Tory win there, and I'll tell you why. The Tory candidate there is this guy named Colin Reynolds. He's an entrepreneurial business kind of guy. He's been hammering the NDP on this confidence and supply deal, this soiled, stained deal from hell the NDP did with the Trudeau government, very undemocratic. I mean, they're allowed to do it in our parliament, but just in principle, very undemocratic. He's been hammering the NDP on this. The NDP candidate there, her name is Leela Dance, and I think she's going to be like dancing out of the riding after the election tonight. Interestingly enough, the riding was held by Daniel Blakey. Okay, now the NDP have held that riding for 36 years. All year.
Blakey family.
Well, absolutely, and it's been NDP for all of the last 4 decades, except for 2011 to 15 when the Tories won it. But I think they're going to win it back tonight. Daniel Blakey, who, by the way, is a really good MP. He's a really fine man, a really good MP, NDP MP. He left. He just quit the Singh caucus to go work for the person who I think is the best premier in the country right now, Wab Kinew. Wab Kinew from Manitoba, wonderful man, brilliant man, smart man, very, very, focused premier. Him and Danielle Smith are doing great things out west. But Blakey went to work for Wab Kinew. Now, here's the thing. Wab Kinew and Jagmeet Singh don't get along. Okay, there's problems between the federal NDP and the provincial NDP, and the backstory is the provincial NDP, a lot of the NDP in Manitoba think that Jagmeet Singh has just lost it and is just not a serious person. And he's gone so far off the range with his policies that it's damaging them. They're just like Jagmeet Singh is trying to put distance between him and Trudeau. The provincial NDP and Wab Kinew are trying to put distance between themselves and Jagmeet Singh.
Well, I'm gonna stop it right there, Dan, because we're out of time. But I'm going to watch with interest tonight, and if they both win, I'll just find a way to get in touch with you tomorrow, because it'll be interesting to look back on it. Do me a favor and don't go away. I've got to get the show off, and I want to talk to you afterwards. That's Dan Donovan of Ottawa Life. Thanks for joining us today, Dan, and I hope we'll see you here again. To the rest of you, stay up late and watch the results of these 2 by-elections, or check out our program tomorrow if you don't find out the results on radio, television, or in the papers, which of course will have them. In any event, I will be here tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and I will see you then.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to the Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.